the local businessmen loaded up their equipment, Troutner's equipment on flatbeds and hauled it from Winona up to Red Wing and unloaded their equipment into a building which was located just underneath the High Bridge, where the existing High Bridge is now. And that's where the Red Wing Motor Company originally started. And in that building, they made not only motors, but they made boats, launches. They made up to 50-foot launches too. So, I mean, there were some good sized boats being built then. Then they moved, they outgrew that facility because the business was so good. So they moved it up to where the existing plant was located right next to this waterworks building. Marine Specialties has a huge building there now, and that's where the original plant used to be for the motor company. And so in 1904, they actually they really got into production pretty heavy. And in 1910, business was so good that they went full-time just making motors, and they got away from building the boats. They just couldn't keep up with the demand, so they went full-time just making motors, and they were shipping these motors all over the world. And at one time they had 200 men working in this plant, so it was a fairly good size operation. And it went, I think the biggest order went to Russia, and I can't remember the year. If Harry's on, he would remember, but I think it was like 40 motors they sent over to Russia. And that was a huge, huge order to produce at the time. So, and during the, Troutner wasn't really in favor of the during World War I either. So they wanted him to make ammunition and so on and so forth. He was so against the war that he did not get involved with doing anything for the government. And even in World War II, same thing. They wanted him to, because of all the machining expertise that this plant had, they wanted him to build stuff for the war effort too, but he kind of declined on that too. But one thing he did do was he do milling for gun turrets. And they were, because of the machining capabilities they had, they were doing that. So during the war, that was the only thing he really did, because like I say, he was not in favor of any of that. So I thought that was kind of interesting that how he went off to the area he did during the war. They kept making motors and shipping them up until about the mid-60s is when it started to falter out. The gasoline engine was going by the wayside. The diesel motor was coming in, so the business started to tail off, and they kind of got away from the business, and eventually in the mid-60s they quit actually building the motors. A lot of the parts and stuff wound up, Barron's wound up with all the parts, spare parts and so on and so forth that were accumulated, and they held and had those parts for many, many years. After that, Bill King came to town, and he got involved with making the Casa Cruiser houseboats there in the late 50s, and he was powering those with Red Wing motors. And I think one of the last boats right now are Casa Cruisers. There's one in Wabasha, and there's one, Wayne Progkosh is just finishing one up down in Pepin. And those Casa Cruisers are pretty much extinct now. Casey Pfluger had one in town, which he just scrapped here a couple of years ago. I managed to get the motor out of it, so that's the only thing left for that thing. So that I'm going to put that on display next year. But yeah, so that was kind of the end of that houseboat deal. That was kind of a short-lived process there too. And those of you that knew Marge Vogel, she was instrumental in doing the interior design work on the Casa Cruisers. And the family has given me all a lot of her original sketches and design and stuff from interiors of those boats, which I want to do an exhibit on someday at the museum, because it's pretty interesting in how she was thinking back then. And if you ever been into a Casa Cruiser boat, you could see that was Marge written all over those boats. So I thought that was very interesting. And Bill King Jr. up in Hastings still has all the prints and stuff on those boats too. So I'm trying to con him out of getting some of those prints to make a nice display on the Casa Cruiser boats. So that's it down, coming down the road. Hopefully sometime I'll get that exhibit put together. So it's just one more thing to do. So after the Casa Cruiser era kind of vaporized, and Dick Tittle came to town, and he bought, and the Fiberglass Boat Works, can't remember the name, they were out in Burnside at the time, but the name slips by me, but he started Mariner Boats, and he was manufacturing in this plant also on Levy Street. And he did that for, I can't remember how many years, but they were big in runabouts and so on and so forth. So that was kind of the end of the era for that building, that full plant down there. And so it was used for, the old Red Wing Motor Company building was used just for storage and so on and so forth. And ironically, Harry Munson, whom I got this motor collection from, was his job when he had the crane business was to knock that building down, which I thought was kind of ironic too. So, but then as years went by, Harry Munson started redoing these motors, these red. There, how long was I been off? You got me now?
Just 20 minutes, Mike.
Oh.
No, you're good. You're good, Mike. You've been less than like a minute.
But yeah, when the motor company quit, then Harry started redoing these motors back then. And let me see here, I get to my notes here on that. He had quite a collection. He would go all over and find these Red Wing motors and redo them and take them to boat shows throughout the Midwest. And one day he approached me if I'd be interested in that collection of motors. And I thought, well, I don't know what the heck I'd do with them, but I got to thinking about it, and I thought, that's a piece of Red Wing history here that I didn't want to see that collection get split up. So I made arrangements with Harry to buy these motors, and I bought all the trailers and all the motors and all the parts and everything that went with it. So I came home one night and I told my wife, Jeanette, I said, hey, I said, I got these motors. What do you think of this? And she said, what are you going to do with those? And I said, well, I don't know. I'll figure something out. So it goes back to sitting on our houseboat looking at this building across the street. And I thought, I put two and two together. I said, I think I'll see if I can rent that building from the city, and I'll put these motors in there and we'll make some kind of a museum. So that's kind of that was the beginning of it. That was the beginning of the end, I should say, in the whole thing. But anyway, so I got the building in 2010. I rented it from the city, and for $1 a year, and I had a 3-year lease. And I thought, well, okay, so I thought this building's going to take a few bucks to straighten it up, so I don't know just how I'm going to do this, but I'll think about it. So I went around to some of the different organizations in town here and snooped around, see if I could maybe raise a little money to retool this building. The feedback was, well, you can't, on a 3-year lease, you can't. No, it won't work. Because I figured my budget at around $300,000 to tool this building up, and so everybody said, well, no, but if you get a longer lease, come back. So I went back to city and I negotiated a 50-year lease for $1 a year, and I figured I could handle that. And then I went back around and started a little fundraising and started raising some money. I sold one of my tankers and I raised a little money there. Nothing like selling company assets to take care of a museum, but I had to do something to get going. And away we went and started raising some money, and we got this thing rolling and started tooling it up because I knew this building was going to have to go on the National Register. But I said, I thought to myself, if I do that, they're going to be real stringent on what I can do. So I quick blew all the glass in there. I took all the window glass that was in there, windows, replaced all the windows and glass in there because nobody knew what it looked like anyways. I thought to kind of get around that, I'm going to put all the glass in it now. So that's what you see there with the archway and so on around there. Those were all wooden doors. I replaced that with glass because to redo the wooden doors would have been just out of this world. So I thought I'll just do it with glass and people can see inside too. So that's kind of what I did. So we got going in there. I wanted to lay a design on that floor with the Mississippi River, some kind of tie-in. So the shoe company had a map done for an advertising piece that Marge Vogel had done for them. So I approached the shoe if I could use that map as a guide for the floor, and they agreed to it. So I took that map, and then I got Art Kenyon, local artist, to come down in his spare time, and I said, Art, could you sketch this into the floor for me? And I want to do this design with the 3-part epoxy floor and so on. So yeah, he agreed to that. Like, this is great. So he came down with his chalk, sketched this whole thing all through the building, the Mississippi River flowing through that floor. And then they had Scotty Albers come up from Albers Flooring, and they put that floor in there, that 3-part epoxy floor, if you've ever been in and noticed what it's like, and laid that floor in there. And that just turned out marvelous. And the floor is bulletproof. So, because when I did all this too, I had to keep in mind that this building was going to flood. In '65, this building went under. And so I got all the outlets raised up, and I put this epoxy floor in there to seal this building up. So that tightened everything up very nice. But I don't know if Art, if I ever could talk him into another project like that again. But man, it did turn out great, and I get so many compliments on it. So that was great, wonderful what he did there. So that was kind of fun. That really made that building stand out. And like I say, it made it sure maintenance free too. And it's, like I say, the floor is bulletproof because we're rolling stuff around there all the time. So I got all the motors put in there, and of course I had the grand opening, and it was a wonderful time. And we've been cruising along ever since then. It's always something to maintain. I've got to get a roof on that building. That's my next project we're working on now. So we're eventually going to get the building all right to where we want it. It's a little ways out, but it takes time and money, of course. So we'll just keep pecking away at it. Another thing that once I got all the motors in there, we also exhibited with the river boats, and we got a theme in there because the American Steamboat Company has been very generous as far as giving me artifacts and different items to put in there. So I like to be able to showcase those river boats too, because it's part of their tour when they come through. So it's kind of fun to have stuff in there. And in fact, I'm going down for the christening of their new boat here, and I'm going to get some more stuff they're going to send back with me on the new boat that they're having done. So that'll be kind of exciting too, to be able to display that stuff. So another item that we got was a boat, a Red Wing launch that was built in 1904. And this boat, we'll be kind of keeping an eye on it. Back in 1998, Jim Leroy had contacted some folks in town here about this Red Wing launch that they would know if the museum would be interested in. And so they went down, looked at the boat. I didn't go with, but my brother Robert and some other folks went down, looked at this boat, and it was a Red Wing launch built in 1904 with a 6-horse motor in there. And he had it at a boat show there, and he had a pretty good number on it. So everybody came back and said, no, we give us too much money for whatever. Well, 20 years later, this was in '99, Jim Leroy calls me up and says, Mike, he says, I got some health issues. I got to get rid of this boat. This boat belongs in your museum. And I said, well, Jim, we don't have the money for this. We can't. He says, well, throw me an offer. He says, I got it. This boat belongs in Red Wing. And I said, well, I agree with you. It belongs in Red Wing, but it says the money just not hanging on the trees here. Well, he says, make an offer anyway. So I hemmed and hawed, and I threw a number at him, and he says, come get the boat. Uh-oh. Well, okay. Man of my word, I come get her. So my brother and I hopped my pickup, headed down to Florida, and we got this boat, and there's quite a history on it. It was built here and originally shipped up to the fish camps up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It was used on a lake up there. And back then, this boat would pull canoes, a raft of maybe 4 or 5 fishing canoes out into this lake, cut them loose, and these people do their fishing, and then this boat would come back and pick them up at the end of the day and bring them back to their fishing camp. So this went on for many, many years. And the boat finally wound up in another town in northern Michigan. That's where Jim Leroy found the boat. And he got it, restored it, and then he moved to Florida, so the boat went with him to Florida. And so it's the only boat that we know of in existence, and that's why I was very excited to get that boat, to bring it home. It's a piece of history that back then in these boats, when they got old enough or dilapidated, they just burned them or sank them. And this boat was lucky enough to survive, and Jim was good enough to get it and restore it up and keep it in wonderful shape. So we find that it's a very big prize for this museum. I was going to have, of course, some kind of a celebration with the boat back in 19, but then everything hit, and that was the end of it. So hopefully this summer I'll have something to showcase this boat. Like I say, it's a very important piece of Red Wing history, and I'm very glad that we're able to get it. My next thing I like to find is the cigar store. Indian used to be in front of Nelson's cigar store. That's my next project. So stay tuned on that one. But it's always fun to hunt this stuff down, and I think it's great.
Mike, you muted again.
I must have a time limit on this, Paul. Is there a time limit?
I don't know.
Okay, and another thing that we've done at the museum was Roxy Nelson went down the river in 1916, and he took his family on a boat. It was called the Creeping Bear, and he ran a journal on this boat, on this trip. So what I did was we had all the original transcript, and you've got it up at the museum, the original. And my sister went all through that and figured it all out and wrote it all out, and we published it, and Shar Hen helped us with it. We published that book. And it was pretty interesting how back then he wanted to set up dealers for the Red Wing Motor Company. He took his family, got on that boat in October, and they headed down to New Orleans, all the way down, setting up dealers for the Red Wing Boat Company. And it's quite an interesting book, and we just got that published not too long ago, so we're going to have that available at the museum too. But I couldn't imagine anybody doing that back then. I mean, they had nothing but that open boat and provisions and away they went with. And his son was Roxy Jr., and he's the one that had the cigar store on the corner of Main and Bush there. So I thought that was rather interesting too. Let's see, what else can I tell you about it? I guess that's about it in a nutshell. Is there anything out there, any questions you might have about the museum that I could answer?
So how do you man it, Mike? Like, do you do volunteers, or what are you going to do, like, starting in July?
Yeah, it's strictly all volunteer. We'll get, like last year, or 2 years ago, when we were last open, we had 4 in rotation, and we like to get more. We're just open now just on Saturdays, but when the river boats come, we have to be open for them. So they're in town, 2-3 days at a time, because they're changing the boats over here. And I think we've got 16 boats this year, but next year it jumps to 40 stops we have on these river boats.
Yeah.
And in 23, I think it's going to 44. So I got to get this staffed up better. And the guys from the Gandy Dancers, they're usually a couple, 3 guys that are helping out next door. So they show the people about the railroad stuff. And that was a nice addition too, by the way. They were in the senior center before, up at the hospital. Of course, when St. John's had everybody moved out of there, they had a place to go. So I made room for them in that other building for them. So that's been a good attraction too. But they're short of room. And so we're looking too at that water reservoir. I want to fill that water reservoir in and make that into an exhibit hall too. That's coming down the road. I just got to figure out how to get that done, because it's going to be a trick to I got to put some, put some big openings in there for doorway, and then also on the backside a service door, so we got to fill it with sand, and it's going to be a project, but it's going to make a wonderful, I think, exhibit hall in there. And I'd like to get a simulator from a barge and put in there, the wheelhouse. That's another thing on my wish list. So, and I like to get a mural painted on the outside of that tank. So I think that would be a fun thing to do down there. So there's always little things in my mind, but it just takes time and, of course, capital to do it. But we're working on it slowly and surely, but it's a fun thing down there. We're looking forward to, continue on and of course, get it back open. I mean, we've been closed all this time too, which has not been helpful. Luckily, we were able to get some funding from the Port Authority, and the county had some funding available too. So we'll be just fine that way. But of course, when your revenue stops, it's not good. But we'll be all right. We'll make it. So, but yeah, staffing it up, that's going to be our big thing. It's fun. I know with the people when the riverboats come, that people from all over the world are there, and they're all, they're riding that riverboat for a reason, because they like the Mississippi River and they like the area, and so it's fun to have them come in there, because they've got a lot of questions and different things for them to see. So it's a fun thing for everybody. So yeah, if anybody's looking for some things to do on the weekends, why, come visit me or stop by or let me know.
Well, add me to your list. I have some time now.
All right. Yep.
Ready, I'm taking notes.
Yeah.
Mike,
Take names and numbers. We're going to start rolling them up here. But,
Mike, George Vogel.
George.
It seemed to me that a couple summers ago, you had people that were taking tours of a boathouse or something, because they want to know what the Boathouse Village was about.
Right.
I don't know whose house you used or something. Have you thought about that, to continue that?
Yeah, I'd like to get that set up too. That's that first boathouse on Boom Zero there, and he's willing to open that up again too, because yeah, that kind of turned into a neat thing too, because people come to the museum and they say, well, what are those garages across the street? What are those garages for? And I said, well, those are boathouses. That's where we keep our boats. Well, then I talked to one of the fellas into allowing us to open up, and his boathouse is perfect too. It's just got the old fishing gear in there, and it's nice, clean house. And so, yeah, I think I can talk him into doing that again. And then, of course, we direct people over there and put some signage out there so they can go down there. And even the local people, and there's a lot of people in town that have never been into a boathouse. So it's fun too to get them to be able to come down and look at them and check it out. So yeah, we'll work on that again.
Mike, John Bogle here. In the other building where the Gandy dancers are, you also have a bunch of outboard motors, fishing gear, and water skis. Isn't that right? Are you almost running out of room in that building?
Yeah, I guess I forgot about all those outboards that got hanging there. In fact, they just had another one come in today. Bob Stark just brought his down from Ely, and it's laying on the dock, and I got to go get it. And yeah, so I'm getting these outboard motors coming in too from, everybody's cleaning out their dad's garage or their grandpa's garage, and lo and behold, this old 3-horse or whatever outboard's been hanging there for 40 years, and they want a place to go with it. So I bring it down, I'll hang it up. So I'm making racks and we're hanging outboard motors up there. So, and same with the fishing gear too. A lot of it's stuff, a lot of Harry's fishing gear from years past that he's got hanging in on display on there too. A lot of different lures and poles and whatever. So yeah, there's just a little bit of everything in there. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is everything river related. Of course, we want to somehow show, and put on display. So it creates conversation, I can tell you that.
Mike, it's Carolyn Hedin.
Yes, Carolyn?
Say, that's a lot for you to take on if the city owns the building, but you're doing all the capital improvements. How does that work?
Well, the deal was, for the $1 a year, I told them I'd do all the maintenance. And, you know, like on the roof deal, I said, well, we can put the roof on for you. We're gonna have to charge you a little rent then. And I said, well, I can contract out and get the local boys to pound that roof on there a lot cheaper than you can, I think. So, I still got to come up with matching money, which you know, with the state's got some funding available too that we'll go after. But yeah, that's my deal. That's why I got it for $1 a year if I do the maintenance. So yeah, it is what it is. And after 50 years, I guess they get the building back and put the dog pound back in there, I guess. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Mike, do you have to mow the grass and keep all the maintenance and stuff, or is the city crew?
Yep. Yep. No, I got a deal. River Valley does all the landscaping, and they've been splitting the bill with me right down the middle. So I've been very appreciative of that. So yeah, I felt it's very important to keep that up, and they got a good crew on there, and so they take care of the lawn and all the shrubbery and everything for me. So I felt that was very important because that's, you know, part of it's the outside. First impression, George, you got to remember that.
Yeah.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Lauren Evinrude here. I have a technical question on the building of the motors. There's obviously no foundry around. Where do they get the parts for the blocks for the motors?
They were having those made by factories. There was a couple of more in Wisconsin, and Lake City was doing some stuff 2 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, that was, but then they bring it in, they machine everything up and bring it in, you know, tolerance or whatever. But one interesting thing too, back in 1916, I believe I got one motor in there that they were dabbling in fuel injection. And so everything they did, they were light years ahead of themselves on things. And a lot of those motors, they didn't, you know, weren't all the same. Things changed all the time. They were forever engineering and changing stuff. So these, I don't think any one motor was the same. They kept tinkering with stuff all the time. And they had some very intelligent people working there, and very skilled machinists working there too. So it was amazing the product they put out, and durable. You know, I was down visiting a fishing fleet in the Bahamas here, was it 5 years ago, and they had 6 boats with Red Wings in there. And that guy said they ran those motors forever up until they couldn't get parts anymore. And they switched them all over to diesel, but he swore by that. And I tape recorded a conversation with him, and it's very interesting how he talked about Red Wing motors and how durable they were. They'd go forever, he said. And it was just amazing. So that was kind of fun to hear.
If no one has any more questions, I think we might end it for the day. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody, like I say, would be interested in helping out and volunteering, we're certainly open to that. I've got my little office on 3rd Street here in heart of downtown Red Wing. So I do my mayoral stuff out of here. I do my museum stuff out of here, and just local chatter. If you got anything good to say, stop in. If you have anything bad to say, keep going. Go up the street somewhere else. But no, it's been fun downtown here too. I get to visit a lot of people and see what's going on and keep on top of what's going on in downtown Red Wing. So it's been fun. But yeah, you're more than welcome anytime. Stop on down, no matter what it's about, museum or city politics, whatever, and be glad to talk with you. So please stop by.
Thank you very much. This is my introduction to the museum. I haven't been there yet, but I'm eager now to go and actually see it in person. So thank you very much.
Yes.
It's very, very enjoyable. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you there.
Good
Thanks
job,
for all
Mike.
you're doing, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks for everything.
Yes.
Thank you.
Marissa, if you want to add me to the volunteer list on your notes there, go right ahead.
Aw, thank
thank you.
You bet.
I appreciate that. We're always looking for people to take just a shift or two throughout the whole summer. It's an easy little stint, and it's so fun just to see the visitors and interact, especially with those boat passengers. And we'll script you and set you up for success too with volunteering. So
That sounds great.
thank you.
Oh, one added to incentive for the volunteers, of course, everybody that helps me at the museum, we always somehow manage to get on the riverboat at cocktail hour. So keep that in mind.
I mean, for sure.
Yeah, because otherwise, yeah, we get tours of the riverboats too. So that's all part of the volunteer. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you.